When I audit websites, the most common problem I see is not around design or copy, as you might expect. It's an absence of a strategy. And what you're touching on is the application of strategy to digital marketing and recognizing that you talked about backdoors. My descriptor for it is spokes. If you think about your website as the hub, and you think about all these different channels you use to talk to consumers as spokes. Email marketing is a spoke, LinkedIn is a spoke, social media is a spoke, advertising is a spoke, PR is a spoke. These are all ways to get your message out to people and for people to come back into the hub.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Always fun to talk to other digital marketers or digital native marketers who are helping clients with websites, user experience, SEO, and all the kit and caboodle. So happy to be chatting with James Hipkin today. He runs Inn8ly. And so let's start off, James, with, what does your day look like? And what are you typically doing for clients, just so people get a frame of reference?
The key thing I do for clients, honestly, is help them move their website from being a checkbox on a list of things to do to being the hub within their digital marketing program so that it's creating value for their customers as well as for their business. An awful lot of folks think of the website, I call it checkboxism, right? I'm a business, I have to have a website. So my nephew made me a website. See, it's over there. I have a website. Check the box. That doesn't work in this day and age with the particularly post-pandemic, with the tremendous growth that online activity has happened. Your website is your front door, and it really needs to be there to support the journey that your buyers are on. And if it's not, they'll go elsewhere.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, and the web presence has a lot of different facets to it, including one's social media presence, one's LinkedIn presence, especially if you're B2B. And what's interesting about all those other presences is it results in there being side doors, and even the content on your website means you have not just your front door, but you have side doors too, right? And I know
Right,
you help people making sure that their content is visible to Google so it can get crawled and show up in the rankings
right.
and results. And so often people's first exposure to the brand isn't the front door. They come in through another room entirely. So
Sure.
I'd love for you to talk through how you sort of illuminate the client's thinking around that. Like, yeah, I get it. It's not we got the front door looking great. Now we have to start thinking about the side door.
Well, exactly. And when I audit websites, the most common problem I see is not around design or copy, as you might expect. It's an absence of a strategy. And what you're touching on is the application of strategy to digital marketing and recognizing that you talked about backdoors. My descriptor for it is spokes. If you think about your website as the hub, and you think about all these different channels you use to talk to consumers as spokes. Email marketing is a spoke, LinkedIn is a spoke, social media is a spoke, advertising is a spoke, PR is a spoke. These are all ways to get your message out to people and for people to come back into the hub, which is your website. And the key thing, a couple of things to recognize about that, these spokes are rented land. You don't have control over them. They can change the rules on you, and they're not going to call you up and ask if it's okay. Your website is something you own, and your email list is something you own. So when you're thinking about the various landing pages for these spokes that you've created, these back doors that you've created, you want to be thinking about how does each one of these provide value to the people who are arriving there? And then how can I convert those people into members on my list, which is the other thing that I own? And if you're creating value, they're much more likely to want to join your list.
Right, absolutely. Both B2C and B2B marketers,
Mhm.
that email list and having that permission relationship is critical. And people say, "Oh, well, it's younger kids are my target audience. They don't use email." Well, they do all have email addresses, and they may not use them the same way you and I use them, or once they get into a business environment where they start to change how they're using email. But if you have a multi-pronged strategy with multiple spokes, maybe SMS is the thing that the young people prefer, or
Right.
maybe it's push notifications in an app, right? But these, you give them the spoke that they want to use for a personalized relationship, and that's key.
Right. And many email service providers are now offering SMS services as
Exactly.
well. So that same concept of it's what you own that record.
Yeah.
You're not renting land on LinkedIn to get your message across, or, I've heard this and I'm sure you've heard it as well. Business owners, oh, I don't need a website. I've got a Facebook page, right? And then Facebook changes something and suddenly they've been banned. And what happens then? Or, I've been counting on search, right? That's a spoke. SEO is a spoke. And then in October, Google did the useful information update. And I don't know about you, but I've got clients whose search traffic dropped right off the table.
Yep, I've seen it not with any clients, but with a bunch of sites. And they also did a reviews update almost immediately following the helpful content update, which
Right.
also hit a bunch of folks hard.
Yep. And you need to be able to, respond to that. And if you now, I've also, and my own website, for example, our traffic went up because I've been concentrating for the last 3 years on creating useful content. And now I'm getting rewarded for it.
Yep. Yep.
So create value for folks and understand the journey that your buyer is on.
Yeah, what's fascinating about the point that you made about having the permission relationship with your customers, regardless of how you define, your monetization,
Mhm.
it could even be a publisher, right? Their customer is
Mhm.
both the advertiser and the reader or viewer. And I think this is interestingly a lesson that the influencer and creator category have not yet learned,
Right.
right? Because you got YouTubers and you got Instagrammers and you got TikTokers who built their entire business on top of that platform and have not come up with a hedge or a safety plan to have a relationship with their customers, their fans, right? With a
That's right.
direct relationship. And I think some of them have realized you can certainly see it from Mr. Beast. And I've got some of his chocolate from
Mhm.
Feastables, right? So he's got a permission relationship with me as a result of his chocolate, which is actually quite delicious. But
Right.
that was his hook, right? To a personal relationship to me, even though I'm not in his typical demographic, right?
Right.
But I think influencers will have to think through what is their strategy for getting a PII, a personally identifiable information relationship with their fans.
Right. Podcasters is another group, honestly.
Absolutely,
But I
absolutely.
can't tell you the first thing I do when I'm being approached about being a guest on a podcast is I'll go and check out their website. And it's really sad sometimes. And they're building up this wonderful audience, and podcasting is a fantastic medium that you can use to reach an audience on a regular basis. But if you're not drawing them back into your world, you're building your business on that rented land, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing that you said earlier that I really liked is about the usefulness of content and the fact that it's been a big focus for you because, those of us who've been in SEO for a long time realize that in the end, that is the one metric that Google will always use,
Yeah,
right? Which is, did this content delight the consumer,
right,
right? And what's fascinating about your hub and spoke model as it relates to that is once you start to think about delighting the consumer in all of your spokes and not just on the hub,
right.
the kinds of things you do strategically around PR and digital PR and social media marketing, those types of things create the content that LLMs love,
Right.
right? So the next gen of SEO, the next gen of search is large language models with
Right.
Bard and ChatGPT. And there will be some queries where people don't go and bother to see a list of 10 things or 20 things to select from, right? They're
Right.
just going to ask some entity of an LLM, hey, what's the best pizzeria on the Upper West Side of Manhattan? And there's just
Right.
going to be one.
Yep.
Or what's the best hotel in Maui? And there's just going to be one. Or maybe it's a really complex query. What's the best hotel in Maui that has a large swimming pool and allows children, right? Or whatever, is family friendly,
Yeah.
right? In Google or in Bing, you could type that in, right? But
Yep.
for certain lazy people, they'll be like, well, actually, I can go ahead and use an LLM for that, and I'm sure it'll pick the right one. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But if
Right.
that starts to give a delightful experience to the consumer, the marketer better be ready. And the
Right.
kind of hub and spoke strategy that you talk about, when properly executed, educates the LLM with ingestible content, right?
Right.
That will help.
And there was a piece to the hub and spoke that I didn't talk about, and I'll bring it up now because it absolutely ties in with what you're saying. Is you have the hub, and I have a hub here, bicycle from a bicycle wheel, and you have spokes, right? And they're kind of cool, but they don't have much value. And you have the rim, and it's the rim is your content and messaging strategy. That's your where you do the deep dive into who your customers are and what's the journey they're on, what's
Mhm.
their pain, what do they like, what are their characteristics, what do they like demographically, what's the gain. The messaging and content strategy is the rim that holds it all together. And the
Absolutely.
power doesn't come from the individual pieces, it comes from the connections.
Yeah, yeah. The other great thing about a hub and spoke strategy with a nice strong rim is that sometimes some content that you're creating can live in multiple places on the rim, right?
Sure.
So you create a really great piece of video content. Well, YouTube's the second largest search engine in the world. They can live there, and they may or
Yeah.
may not change their algorithm in the future, and they may or may not change their
Right.
rules. But that same video is embedded on your blog. And
Right.
maybe it sits in other places. Maybe there's some
Or
partner
the
organization where it can sit.
or the transcript becomes an email,
Right.
or the transcript becomes a blog post,
Hmm.
or and the other piece of it is that just having a video is nice, but having a video that isn't relevant to your audience, that's just ego. That's where the messaging and content strategy informs all of the things you're doing in all of the places you're doing it, and it really helps you get clarity and focus on your messaging and understanding the journey that folks are on, because the messaging that's appropriate when somebody is just beginning their journey is not going to be the same as the messaging that's appropriate when they're like deep into consideration and prospecting,
Right.
where they've got specific questions that they need answered and obstacles that need to be overcome. Whole different thing compared to, wow, I ought to start thinking about this, right? Top funnel, mid funnel, and then what happens at the bottom.
Yeah. One thing that's really interesting, and it tends to be more the budgeter, but the deeper pocketed marketers, right, is that they actually end up with a really well built rim, right,
Yep.
with lots of the spokes attached to it. But yet they're in not the most exciting industry category,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then we usually advise them, like, well, let's just think about the tangential areas of what types of content would the buyer persona that you're most interested in be also consuming. Because
Right.
if we then put on the brand as publisher hat, we
Right.
can help co-create some of that content. And again, it could live in many places, but at
Right.
least, you know, you'll reach the right audience, and it won't need to be like front and center with the brand and the problems you solve necessarily, but the brand will be there. It'll be a sponsor.
Right.
It'll reach the right audience.
Right. And
So
it builds microtransactions. And these microtransactions of increasing value build trust.
absolutely.
What you want at the end of the process, you want the conversion event to stop being a sale and start being the next logical step in their journey.
Hmm.
And when that happens, you'll end up with customers who are much more likely to be loyal, much more likely to pay full price, much more likely to, you know, buy more things from you, much more likely to advocate for you with their colleagues, right? Because they don't feel like they've been tricked into something. It was like, yeah, this is sensible because they've built that relationship through those interactions. Review posts are a great way to do this. Even when you're reviewing your competitors and putting your product in context with your competitors, those review posts bring a lot of credibility to your offer.
Yep. That's
As a mid-funnel brand as publisher idea.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's amazing if you sort of look at the research, how often the final tiebreaker between brand A or brand B or product A or product B or service A or service B is the trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that trust is essentially converts into the confidence that the person has in making that choice, right?
Right,
And sometimes price becomes secondary, right?
right,
Because if they have the trust and the confidence, they're like, well, at least I'm not going to kick myself later, right?
right.
If I go with the one that I trust.
Exactly. I've done a lot of work in loyalty over the course of my career, and I remember being in a meeting. It was a large telecommunications company, and a researcher was about to present the output of a research study. And this guy specialized in loyalty and doing research against loyalty. And he said something in the preamble that really, really resonated with me, and it's informed a lot of my work in marketing since then. He said, in his experience, 90% of loyalty problems can be traced to a flawed sales process. So think about that for a second. When you recognize how important loyal customers are to your business, 90% of loyalty problems can be traced to a flawed sales process. Have you thought about your sales process in that context?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is one of those epiphany moments.
Mm-hmm. Oh
And
yeah.
it also reflects on the importance as you think about your customers and you think about your marketing strategy relating to customers. The more you know about the kinds of customers for whom you're a great fit and who
Mm-hmm.
are your power customers due to LTV in particular, but also AOV or size of deal in the case of B2B,
Mm-hmm.
right? That also means breaks the sales process versus having a finely tuned sales process. The more
Right.
you know about the kinds of customers that are your power customer, 90/10, 80/20, whatever it is,
Right. Right.
more of those kinds of customers are the stickier ones, the ones who spend more, the ones who are more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're also more likely to be more loyal. So it's
Right.
important that you really take the deep breath, analyze your customers, think about the personas, think about, the difference between your average customer and your best customer.
Yeah, that best customer concept is so important. You may have heard the statistic. It's pretty common out there. If you a 1 to 2% increase in the loyalty of a customer base will generate a 60 to 80% increase in the net present value. So that tells you two things: the power of loyalty. But then ask yourself the question, why is there such a big range? The 60 to 80%. Why is there such a big range in that impact? That's a head scratcher. And earlier in my career, I had the opportunity to dig into that with it was a credit card brand, Visa. And what it amounted to was different customer bases have a different percentage of these best customers. The higher your percentage of best customers in your customer base, the more leverage you have, the more impact that loyalty shift is going to have. So if your percentage of best customers in your customer base is significant, 40%, 50%, and you increase loyalty by 2%, you're going to get an 80% growth in NPV, right? So that best customer concept is really powerful. And these best customers, they're not regular folks. They're deeply invested in the category. They're very knowledgeable. They understand what your offer is. They understand what your competitors are offering. You need to speak to them in a different way than you would the average customer.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, it's critical that as one goes through the strategy, one thinks through, the level of resale that one goes through on a
Mhm.
customer, right? So, hopefully, if you're a wedding planner or a honeymoon travel agent, you're
There's
only
not a lot of
selling
resale.
once. However, we know that that's not the case. Um, but you've got like washing machines and cars, high consideration things that still have loyalty, right? There are a lot of people who buy the same car brand over and over again, and so the LTV of a person who really loves Subaru is actually quite dramatic, right? And if you
Yes,
can move the needle and have them not be a switcher, where sometimes they buy a Volvo, sometimes they buy a Subaru, that is has a dramatic impact on the your ability to invest in marketing, to be
right,
perfectly honest, right?
right,
Because that multiplicative effect is so powerful.
right. And in automotive, and I happen to have a lot of experience in automotive, one of you know, the proliferation of lease offers, because in automotive, it's a large capital expenditure and people don't do it that often. But one of the ways that the automotive folks attract the people who've turned their car over every 2 years, every 3 years, is through lease offers. People who are more willing to take a lease offer are the kinds of folks who want to switch their car out every 2 to 3 years. That's really valuable to the
Right.
automotive guy, as opposed to James, who is driving a 2000 Lexus RX 300 still to this day, 23 years old and still going like a bandit.
Yeah, but it's very interesting. Like you think about other industry categories, right? Like apparel, and how different loyalty in apparel or loyalty in a consumer product, detergent, right? It's still loyalty. It just manifests itself a little bit differently, and the switching cost is much lower, right?
Right,
So I may actually slightly prefer Tide to all or Coke to Pepsi, right? But there's always a segment of users, the ones who are indifferent, right?
right.
And that's where the two titans always battle it out, right? Over the folks who are switchers. And I'd love to hear your thoughts within a digital marketing experience where it's almost frictionless, right? My ability to buy is pretty much anywhere, right? I can buy, or my ability to choose brand A over brand B is pretty much frictionless. So
Right.
once you no longer have to drive down the street to get gas from a different place, if you can get the digital equivalent of that online and have no friction, how should a marketer think that through?
Well, the principles are still the same. The principles of is the relationship creating value? And what you're looking for is value that goes beyond the transactional and functional benefits of whatever it is you're selling. Because through that value that goes beyond the functional benefits was what I call creates relationship equity. And that relationship equity, just like equity in a house, that's the intrinsic value of the relationship. And those principles are as valid in digital as they are in traditional marketing. And now, do digital marketers understand it? Do they take advantage of it? Not so much. Because of that frictionless, it's so easy to get, you know, churn is not as big an issue. But the principle is still the same for the digital marketer who does embrace it and does start to build that relationship with folks that goes beyond the transactional, particularly amongst heavy users. The payback on that can be huge. Again, because most people aren't doing it. So if you are, you're going to be ahead of the game and people will value it.
Absolutely. Great point. Absolutely. One other thing I'd like to bring up, because I think a lot of folks don't really understand the impact or of it or getting it right, is that user experience on the landing pages of your site
Hmm.
Small changes there have a multiplicative impact, right? So if
Right.
you sort of think about the entire funnel from the first impression out on one of the spokes all the way through to, let's say, your first monetization event,
Hmm.
or let's say your first touch point event, even if that's a
Right.
registration, right? If you can increase the conversion rate a little here, increase the average order rate a little bit here, increase the LTV a little bit here, that percolates up the chain to allow you to afford more for media. And if you're in an auction-based media environment like
Right.
search or social or display, it's all auction these days. So your
Right.
ability to afford it depends on how well your engine is running, right?
Right.
And so there's all these different places for improvement. And it seemed by looking at your website that you guys place a lot of emphasis on making sure you get all of those places improved.
Right. Exactly. The reality is you have 6 seconds or less to engage somebody when they get to your website. You've probably heard about the goldfish that has a 6 second attention span. It's a myth. It's not actually true. But I mean, as a business owner, my God, you should be so lucky. And this is also connected to what we were talking about before in the creation of trust. A lot of these things are trust events. They're subconscious, but they're still trust events. For example, the first way is page load speed. The 6 seconds doesn't start when the page appears. It starts when the page is asked for. And if you're taking 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds, 4 seconds for that page to appear, you've just blown three quarters, 50% of your allotted time in this person's attention span. Alternatively, that a page appears virtually instantly in a second or less. That's an instinctive trust event. Well, this operation is professional. The second thing is people are always nervous. And instinctively, when a page appears, their instinctive first reaction is, am I in the right place? So if you're doing all of your communication around your name, Kevin Lee, and people arrive at the website and it says digit or did it? Did
Did
it?
it? Yes.
Did it? Sorry. They're going to go, huh, am I in the right place? And suddenly you've got them thinking about that. You don't want them thinking about that. You want them thinking about, does this guy have the solution to my problem? So the next thing is give them a benefit-oriented reason to stay. Don't start by talking about yourself. Don't be inside out. Don't tell them how awesome you are. I happen to think you're pretty awesome, but lead with the problem that they're trying to solve. There's a very well-known copywriting framework called PASS. We use it in ads. We use it on landing pages. Problem, agitate the problem, then solve the problem. So you want to lead with that problem that the consumer is trying to find an answer to. Then you can solve the problem. And then you want to build trust again. And that's where social proof, testimonials, brands you've worked with, these reasons to believe that you're a credible resource need to be presented. I can't tell you the number of landing pages I've looked at, home pages I've looked at. You have to scroll all the way to the bottom before you see a digital carousel of testimonials, right? People don't scroll all the way to the bottom. People don't look at these carousels. One powerful, relevant testimonial high up on the page will do you much better service than six that are buried in a carousel at the bottom of the page.
Excellent point.
You
People
know,
abandon that page. That's the second most likely event. It's actually a very highly likely event. It's usually over 50% of the people hit that back button pretty quickly.
right.
And once they hit that back button, you lost them.
That's right. That's right. And then make the last of the six ways to engage somebody in 6 seconds or less is make the content easy to consume. You know, use white space. Use your images to support the content, recognize that most people are right-handed. They scan a page from the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner. Don't bury your button in the lower left-hand corner of a block of content because they don't look there. They're looking in the lower right-hand corner. Things like newspapers are printed in columns for a reason. Narrow columns are easier to read. Don't string your content all across the page. Make sure that you've got high contrast between the text and the background. White text on top of a light colored image is just about impossible to read for those of us who are celebrating anniversaries of our 40th birthday. Um, but I see this stuff all the time. You know,
Yeah. One thing I really like about almost all the points that you made is the majority of those factors are also Google ranking factors,
of course,
right?
yes, they are.
ADA compliance and easy to read and easy to consume and clear and concise and page load speed, right? Those are all
Yeah.
factors that
And
Google values as well.
eat. The author, does the author have authority? Right? These are all factors that are rooted. Google puts it on the front page of their shareholders report. Our search is there to serve searchers. So if your content serves searchers, you're much more likely to get ranked. And
Absolutely.
that, as you said earlier, that is not going away. That's fundamental to their reason for being.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a lot that food for thought for marketers. So if they have an interest in reading more of your content about marketing, where would they go to find that? LinkedIn or your website?
Our website is great. Our blog on Inn8ly is full. I'm quite prolific. I write a lot about this stuff. If you want to have me pop in and have a look at your website, I offer a free website audit. You go to 6secondsorless.com. You can book a free website audit, and I'd be happy to talk to you about your website and ways that you can improve your website. And oddly enough, we spend a lot of time not talking about the website. We spend a lot of time talking about who is your best customer,
Again,
because it really starts and ends there.
absolutely. Great advice for everyone listening or watching. I appreciate you having me on or joining me on my podcast, James. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure, Kevin. I'm looking forward to it too. Thank you so much.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.